Okay, Sashi, please. Okay.
Okay, so all right. So today we are going to talk about chapter 16. And I don't know how many of you were here for chapter 15. If you can just hit the thumbs up or something that tells me that you were part of chapter 15 at all. That was like almost a month ago. So last 2 weeks ago, we did a focus on karma yoga, which is just, um, whoops, focus on the first 6 chapters. And we have another one coming up after this, which will be focusing on devotion, without, my focus will be without God. What does devotion mean? And that to me is a better understanding, especially if you remember from chapter 15, right? There was the big reveal in verse 15.16 or something, where we finally understand who is this I that he has been talking about the whole time. So the way we came about here was chapter 13 was about field and the knower. Knower is that I that perceives things. So once Krishna tells to Arjun that, try to understand who is it that is seeing, understanding, thinking, eating, walking, knowing this field, the one that is outside the I. Once you understand that, you can attain to the supreme. What is the supreme, right? And then I am the foundation of the 3 gunas. He then expands upon the field. What is this field? Field is basically 3 gunas, 3 properties of anything, right? So remember, this was written way long back in our human history, when they didn't obviously have science the way we know it today. So they had to explain the world in a certain way. So the way they explained it was there is inertia, there's movement, and then there is something good that comes, like a direction that goes, takes us up beyond the good and bad, right? So there were the 3 different ways of things in the world, that one could then define based on that, those 3 gunas, 3 properties. One could define what a stone is, what a plant is, what a rat is, what an animal is, what a human being is, and what is all of that stuff, right? So there was a way to explain these worlds by Sankhya. Was this very, very ancient philosophy, long, long time ago. That was probably the first initial, attempt in Hinduism to kind of talk about this all, really a generic philosophy, if you will, and that became the foundation for a lot of other Hinduism philosophy. Gita came much later, obviously, and so Gita steals, rightfully so, from a lot of old philosophies. So it's a nice compendium of Hinduism. And then in 15, who is this I, right? The supreme, attain the supreme. What does that even mean? So there is this concept of supreme meaning Purushottama. And that is expounded upon, right? So the big reveal is that all along, Krishna, the human being, the human friend of Arjuna, he basically, the way he is talking about things to him is talking more from a deeper perspective than just the superficial, like jealousy, anger, hatred towards the other side. So they're on the battlefield, isn't it? So we know all of that, and we'll talk a little more about the background. So in 15.10, there was a statement that he makes. The deluded do not perceive him. Let me just put this in full screen. Okay, let's talk about that 15 a little bit later on. So it looks like I had this here. Okay, so Gita obviously means a song. We have talked about this many times. Experience, it's some kind of a very high level experience that obviously is different from eating ice cream. Or actually eating ice cream, can you ever explain what it feels like in a chapter. People try to attempt to say, no, we have words like sweet and vanilla essence and all that stuff, but how do you explain that? And here we are talking about even more deeper understanding of the world, which is beyond normal understanding of anger and jealousy and color of skin and all that kind of stuff, right? So here there's a deeper experience, yet there's an attempt to express it in words, some kind of a logic, and then it is left up to our interpretation, right? And Gita, that's why it is in a song format. And the beauty of it is that you can peel off the layers at a very superficial level, but you can go deeper and deeper. And every generation, it has had a unique sort of a meaning. There are so many translations by different really smart people. So we are now entering the era of AI and all of that, right? So we have started questioning what does even consciousness means. But that was the pursuit all along, right, for human beings way back when. Now, when we read Gita, right, or intellectualize, maybe I'm doing that, I don't know. So that whole direction is fraught with ego, right? Because here I can say I know Gita because I read it and I talked about it. I'm done. So it stays outside is the point, right? It stays apart from me. So when you close your eyes, let's say the whole planet just vanishes, right? Your house is gone, nothing is gone, and you're not able to see at all. One thing you still continue feeling is the notion of knowing I, right? I never dies, right? I is your most fundamental knowledge, fundamental wisdom of yourself or anything, right? The I is by far the most closest understanding that you have, right? That never goes away until you go away, obviously. So this needs to be one's own experience. And, obviously we are reading something passed through generation, all that stuff. But you yourself will come to this similar understanding, and you might want to write your own Bible or Gita, who knows? But even your understanding by yourself, even if you're not able to relate it, there's a lot of saints in India who are very illiterate, like are not able to read or write, but their interpretation of life is so much close to Gita. So, words don't matter. In fact, words can become limitations, right? They can induce ego in us. So this understanding, this experience, one is aware without ego, meaning it becomes infused with your I, meaning it doesn't feel any different from like when you close your eyes, the understanding of the world is very similar to what Gita wants to convey. So it becomes part of your nature, if you will, right? So in this chapter, in this specific chapter, right, the focus is what are we looking for here, right? On this planet, and what is the wealth we acquire over time here, right? So obviously there's money and house and all that stuff. So typically animals are looking for food and shelter out there, right? And that's the bare necessities. Now humans have an advantage where, we can plan for more. So we end up hoarding more of the food, shelter, everything, right? And greed is obviously everywhere, right, today. And humans can also inquire within, right? So that's a very unique capability for ourselves where we just sit by ourselves, ponder upon like, what does it mean to be a mother, for example, or a father? Not just like taking care of the son, but why is this feeling like this? Why not this feeling exists for me with some other kid? Or anything for that matter, right? You can start taking these extra peeling off extra levels. Sorry about that. Everybody wants to sell something. All right, next. So a lot of this acquisition, right? One Swami says that what we are looking for is happiness. So what we do is we tend to collect a lot of finite things, but our essential goal is infinity. But infinity is not just collection of things, right? So how many things would you collect and say, okay, I think I'm going to be happy? The happiness is a certain kind of a feeling which is beyond just the objectification or anything right out there. So it is an internal state, if you will. So that's what we are going to be looking for in this chapter, which is, what is this, what are we acquiring here, right? Over time. Or, they do use the concept of rebirth. So over multiple lives, what are we acquiring? So in chapter 15, he says, so why did chapter 16 start? Because he says, like, the deluded do not perceive him in his coming in and his going forth, or in his staying and enjoying an assumption of quality. They perceive who have the eye of knowledge, right? So the deluded and the other who actually have the eye of knowledge, right? So there is a distinction that he's trying to make in chapter 15. And then he says the yogins, the people who understand yoga or who are practicing yoga, not the yoga of the Santa Monica quality, right? We are talking about yoga meaning oneness with everything. That oneness is actually the meaning of yoga. It's not the exercises. So see the Lord in themselves, right? So this was the big reveal in chapter 15, right? So one has to see that within oneself. But though they strive to do so, the ignorant perceive him not, right? So there is this two paths, Daiva and Asura, the two terms here, up here. The ignorant perceive him not, as they are not formed in the spiritual mold. So what is the spiritual mold is what chapter 16 is all about. But also, as we go talk about this, right, remember that good and bad is not so much of looking at others and identifying, oh, he's full of the good qualities and he is full of the bad qualities. No, that's not the point here, right? Because when you are practicing that, you are full of bad qualities. When you are pointing to others, this is more about an internal investigation of ourselves, right? And this wealth that they're talking about, right? So this sampad here means the collection or the wealth. Vibhaga means separation. So Daiva, Asura. Daiva is the divine. Asura is demonic, if you literally want to take it. But in our terminology, something that is spiritually good and spiritually unbalanced. Asura. Sura means balance. So this right direction really depends on the psychological wealth we collect over time, right? Today, who we understand as Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or some poor person, they both are equally poor, basically. They all are equally poor. And we all just walking around, that's not the wealth that we are talking about, obviously. Gaining the inner true wealth is ultimately the lordship, right? So the Lord or whatever, the God thing that they're talking about. And eventually, this gaining path leads to one themselves becoming the Lord, right? Man or woman. One can ask the right question and attract right things, right? So this is the right direction, right? This right question, obviously, is something that you will come to. In the East, in ancient times, right, long time ago, when the Sankhya and all of that stuff existed, there was a lot of using oneself as the lab, right? So there was a lot of inquiry within, because they had nothing else to do. So there was a lot of inquiry within myself, like, what is this? Why do I get angry? Why am I happy? Or all of that kind of stuff, right? There was a lot of that that happened. So that was the right questioning that happened. And they attracted eventually, I think, a much better understanding of what does it mean for one to be peaceful, right? So the materialism was sort of looked down upon, and spirituality had a very novel way of understanding that, and that is a layer above normal humans, isn't it? Now, over time, what has happened is we're all westernized, right? The whole entire planet is like this now, right? All the humanity is like this. We sort of took some of these concepts, they use Gita in management training as well these days, right? So they use it for the so-called law of attraction or whatever. A lot of that has to do with, oh, I want to attract more wealth, right? This is again a downward trend in humanity, not upward trend, right? But even East, anybody everywhere, they're the same at this point, right? Because we've been globalized and westernized and all of that stuff. Now, in this particular story, or in the scenario here, Arjun has been rightly dejected. Remember, we covered this a couple of sessions ago, where chapter 1, it starts where he says, like, why am I fighting this war? Maybe I should become a monk, is what he says, right? That kind of questioning or confusion is a good state to be. So why did he come to that, right? There was certain amount of inner wealth that he had gathered over time, where he could start questioning in the right direction. And the result was this Gita, right? So as you go, over time, you will come to that place where you will start questioning, deeper understanding of what is this I, right? Who am I? Why am I here? And all that stuff, right? And this right questioning, depending on the kind of question you ask, you're going to either collect this inner wealth or you're going to be utterly poor. And this is also nicely captured in Bible, right? In Matthew, which is Googling this, obviously, but I knew the phrase. So for whoever has will be given more. See, once you start in this right direction, you will continue in the right direction, even though there might be some failures at different points of time. But because of that inner wealth that you have collected, you will be pulled up. You will continue in that direction, right? And they will have in abundance. Whoever does not have, so once you start going in that negative direction, more negative, more, like greed is just going to supersede with greed, more greed. And even what they have, there might be some iota of spirituality left in that person, but that'll be taken away from them, right? And there is going to be a phrase that we will read here in Gita, which kind of he says that they get put into more of hellish worlds. Okay. All right. So how people come to a given place in life, right? That's the battlefield. So Arjuna, obviously, whole Gita is set up in the battlefield context, but we are constantly in battlefield, and we are constantly fighting some kind of a thing. And most of the time, if you think about it, even between strangers, I think many times the conflicts between the strangers are not the most interesting conflicts. In fact, maybe there is no conflict between the strangers. The conflicts happen between familiar people who are close to each other most of the time, families, brothers, and all that stuff, right? Same thing is happening here. So there is a good side typically on the battlefield, and there are like typically 5 qualities, at least, I'm going to throw in some symbology from the Mahabharata, the larger epic, the characters in that. The 5 brothers who are fighting for the kingdom, who are on the right side, they are firm in dharma. So the older brother, firm in dharma means he is firm in the dharma, the current dharma, where they are in the battlefield is the yuddha, mean battle. And your older brother had no confusion. He had no inkling that he wanted to try something else. He was completely 100% into the battle, right? So that is that duty bound type of a thing, is direction into the good, right? On the good side. Spiritual pathos is Arjuna. So Arjuna was a great warrior, but he had confusion. He was like, oh, wait a second, is this spiritually right, right? So is this the right thing to do? So he had those questions. Then there is Bhima, the third brother, who is sort of like Hercules, if you will, right? He's very robust, very well built and all that stuff. And but he's also very like very soft at heart, if you will, and very emotional, but also bhava is the word that they use, meaning he has a deep emotional quotient, if you will, right? And there is a brother who is very principled, and then there is the twins who are on the side of right and truth, right? So these characters, that family sort of represents sort of like the good human side, if you will. And then there's obviously the bad side, asura. Sur basically means balance. Asura means somebody who is not in balance with nature or whatever. So let's talk a little bit about those characters, right? So I have more details here. But obviously, again, this good and bad is totally very much based on our conditioning, right? So be aware of that. But typically, one has to observe for oneself, like where they are on this. Most of the time, people will associate with this. So what Krishna does in chapter 16 is there's really only one verse he spends time on, which he talks about good qualities. Everybody will say, yes, we understand that. But the level of understanding is what distinguishes you between this and this, right? And that's where he starts peeling off the layer. In the rest of the whole, all of the chapter is all about the so-called watch out for these things despite your good qualities, right? And that is, everybody has to watch it out for themselves. And that all depends on your conditioning in the society, how one has grown up, how they have grown up. And we just have to unlearn, right, over time, which is what Arjuna is going through in this one. So the bad side, there's blind king. He knows the right thing, yet he chooses to ignore it, right? So there's ignorance. Dhritarashtra is his name, meaning it also means holding on to the kingdom. But even though he's on the bad side, he does want to use somebody who is a wise person, right? He has a charioteer who is very unbiased, and he is the one who is reading, or not, he's narrating what happened on the battlefield, right? On the 10th day. But blind king, who is literally blind, obviously, so very heavy symbology there. And then he chooses to stay like this in ignorance until his prince, his attachment, his son, is alive. And then he has 100 other sons, right? 100 sons basically literally means there are so many 100 disorders, meaning many disorders that can impact our way of thinking, which can blindside us and which can make us blind. That's literally what that, I mean, not literally, but that's what that means symbolically. His wife, the queen, has blindfolded herself. She's not blind, but she chooses to stay blind because her husband is blind. But this is also negligence, flawed. That is also, again, causes haywire. And she's blind. Part of it is love for the family, for the son, choosing to not see despite eyes. We do that, right, all the time. There's a lot of things happening in the world or to anybody. We choose to not want to say things, what is supposed to help, right? Because out of fear of society, fear of nature, fear of neighbors or whatnot, right? Then the prince himself, the one who Arjuna absolutely hates him, right? Duryodhana, he is representing attachment. He's the apple of their eyes, attached to the throne, root cause for all the sufferings, right? Attachment is the root cause of all the suffering. This is what Buddhism, Hinduism wants to try to say. Duryodhana, that's the name of this prince, and the meaning of that name is hard to fight, right? Attachment is hard to fight. Prince's brother, who is absolute evil, right? He does some really terrible things to Arjuna's wife. And his acts are ignored by his family, right? And they give some justifications, like ethical justifications. How many times we do that, right? We justify for so many things, and we feel good about it, right? Over time, we start feeling good about it. His name is Dushasana. That actually means hard to rule. Yeah, unruly. right? He's completely, as you go in this direction, there's bound to be evil, which at which point you cannot bring it in control, right? You're too far removed from spirituality, obviously. And they have 100 brothers, and in Sanskrit, you might call them as vikara or mental disorders, if you will, right? Psychologically speaking, we're talking about the symbology here. There are 100, meaning many different things that can impact us and triggers us into getting into the worldly entanglements. The grandfather is Bhishma. He is Bhishma, right? That name means formidable or terrible. You know, there's apparently the Russians are, what is his name? Ivan the Terrible, sort of like that, right? He was really hard to beat and all that stuff, right? You know, he's very big warrior, but he's confused. You know, he's devoted to this kingdom. Didn't matter who was the king, and he knew that Arjuna should have become the king, but he continues to support this current king, right? So that is that confusion. So confusion is also causing haywire, right? Then there is the teacher. These are the two people that Arjuna calls out, right? He says, look, I can't kill these people. He actually loves them. He hates all of these guys, but he loves these two because they're nice people, but they are themselves kind of spiritually conflicted. The Grandmaster is very knowledgeable, right? But he has no discernment, right? So this is a way of looking at, like, you could know a lot of things, yet you might not have the wisdom to take the right side at a given moment of time, right? Dronacharya means full of knowledge, right? And he is the teacher who kind of teaches all kinds of skills. And the one skill he teaches Arjuna is the archery. Then there are people who are on the right side, right? You know, we talked about this a little bit. Arjuna, he is the ideal prince warrior. He's supposed to represent our human state when we are teachable. In a teachable moment, we're sort of like the warriors, right? You know, in the sense that we want to take on the fight and you're willing to understand the instructions. So you're willing to absorb what is given to you. But we might also be conditioned. That's the human part of it, conditioned, bias. But we also have some altruistic things in us. We are willing to let go, right? You know, Arjuna is willing to let go of the kingdom. He says, like, I don't care. I could become a monk. So in that state, right, we're innocent in a way, right? And we are brave and innocent. So we're clear, pure in that sense. But we just need a little more understanding. And now those five brothers, we talked about that. Draupadi is the wife of actually, Draupadi is the wife of all these five brothers, right? Interesting. Born of fire is what that literally means. And she becomes like the person who sort of triggers this whole conflict, not deliberately. You know, she is troubled by the prince and the prince's brother, actually, in a horrific way. And then the whole battlefield is ensued, right, at that point. But she's born of fire, so she's as if coming there to purify the humanity, you know, getting rid of the evil, if you will, right? But then there is somebody who is beyond all of this kind of need to be good or bad. He's not influenced at all by any of this stuff, but he's there to guide. And he chooses to be the charioteer, the driver of Arjuna's chariot. And he deliberately puts these different things in front of Arjuna to kind of drive his confusion towards the right direction. Human essence, right? So this is, again, in a way, we sort of have this teacher within, deep buried within us. That's the whole point of chapter 15, if you will, right? But sometimes it might also be worthwhile if we can identify this in somebody else who can become your teacher. So it's not at all about the other person. It's more about your being more of a student, right? And then you're learning or unlearning, right? Unlearning all the conditionings. And then whatever your altruism is, the teacher is giving it the right direction, because, you know, we might just do charity just for charity's sake, without really cleansing our internal, issues or consciousness. So his name is Krishna, right? Krishna means charming and all attractive. But it also means, like, you really break this out down into Sanskrit and all that. One that is left when one does nothing, right? Let's say you come to that state when your pure self, when you're doing nothing, you're not reading, you're not writing, you're not talking to anybody, whatever, right? So that is that state when karma ceases, no doership. And then, so okay, just briefly, right? So there is this fight between this Brahma and Brahm, sorry. Brahm basically is one word, which means confusion, but Brahma, on the other hand, means vastness. So we'll talk about that bhava. We talked about this a little bit. Maybe at some point we will cover a little more about the Mahabharata story, but Brahm is the confusion and Brahma means vastness, right? So when you are all inclusive, there's no confusion. When you are confused, meaning your view has become limited and you're spiritually conflicted at that point. Yeah, so we'll skip this for now. Just a couple more sentences about this, right? So current education, right? So teaching today, or to some extent all the time, I guess, separates this and that, right? So there is a certain type of a duality in our teaching, so the seeds of attachments are sown way early in our childhood. So that's that unlearning process that one has to go through and then have a better understanding of science and physics and all that good stuff. Education system can never create integrated humans, right? But individuals with corporate greed and motive. And we see that, right? So this kind of a thing that happens early on is the problem. So let's skip that middle part for now. So the main thing here between Krishna and Arjuna, the dynamics one can understand is that Arjuna is willing to become the student. So one has to become a student, only then learning happens. So it is not dependent on the teacher. It's more dependent on us. So the whole idea here is the onus can be brought upon oneself. And so, but we tend to kind of blame the school or blame the teacher or whatever, right? So there is a surrender that Arjuna shows and asks him to guide him. And then until Lord is not with you, what that means is that within you, there needs to be some readiness for you to observe your anger. You can be angry, but you can also observe your anger, right? That's that lordship. Okay, anyway, so chapter 16, I think that I can break it down into 3 sections, right? The first section sort of covers who is in control of the chariot. So we have talked about this symbol. Now, not the chariot that actually Arjuna's chariot is also a great example because Krishna becomes the charioteer and the horses are supposed to be the senses and the reins are the mind. The charioteer is the Lord himself. In that case, in our case, it will be our consciousness. Why do we say it's our consciousness? We'll see in a moment. So one is who is in control? That's the question. What happens when horses take over the chariot? Yeah? There's no control by the charioteer. And then the third is a plea from Krishna saying that let the charioteer take control. Don't cast aside the shastra or the wisdom. So we will see what that is. So who is in control, horses or the charioteer? Consciousness lights up the mind. So our mind or our senses, we can taste and we can touch and we can see and all of that stuff we can do mostly because, not mostly, only because we are conscious, right? So at the foundation of all of this is consciousness. Okay. And that is supposed to be the driver or the charioteer. What happens is we are enjoying via these senses and mind all the objects. Now, these are the two paths that can happen, right? Some can actually stand apart and not get caught up in those objects. And that is the state of liberation or freedom. You're not bonded to an object. These are the qualities that leads them towards liberation, when you can observe your thoughts separately and not get pulled by those thoughts. Here you're anchored in consciousness. Yeah, so you know that I'm a conscious being, the other person is a conscious being, and that's it. That's all that matters. If the other person is angry, I'm not angry. That's okay. That just happens to be the current situation. You do not carry it over to the next situation, or no past, no history, no future, whatever, right? Now, in phrase 1 or in the verse 1, there is a whole slew of qualities that are mentioned. So we'll read this a little bit here. The Blessed Lord said, meaning the inner voice of Krishna, let's say, or I also feel like sometimes it is inner voice of Arjuna. Fearlessness, purity of temperament, steadfastness in the yoga of knowledge, giving, self-control, sacrifice, the study of scripture, ascesis, candor, straightforwardness, harmlessness, truth, absence of wrath, self-denial, calm, absence of fault-finding, compassion to all beings, absence of greed, gentleness, modesty, freedom from restlessness, energy, forgiveness, patience, cleanness, absence of envy and pride. These are the wealth of the man born into Deva nature, right? So now when you look at this, I think we all will relate to this, right? If we all feel like, yeah, we're doing all of this. Now the beauty of this stuff is that if you do it in its truest form, any of the one of this quality, all of these will follow. That's the interesting part of this. All these so-called Deva nature, they're just different manifestations of this one inner state that Krishna has been talking about the whole time. You know, when you're anchored in consciousness, whatever comes out of you is all of this stuff, right? So if you see somebody has that true fearlessness, not just like crazy bravado, but fearlessness, right, of spirit, then potentially she also has self-control. They also have a very giving nature. There's a candor, the absence of wrath. So it's all like you have one quality, everything else is there. That's my point. And now what can happen is when we read this, we all associate with it. Even the evilest person on the planet will be able to take all of their acts and put it in the context of all of these things. So that's why it is fraught, right? It is just very difficult to know what is good from evil. So that is going to lead to, that is an internal observation. So you have to look at yourself. So the balance or lack of balance is obviously your own self-assessment. Now most are lost, right? And that's what we were talking about. And we are pretty much busy in saying like, I am enjoying it, I am suffering, right? So there is this enjoying and suffering, and then there is the it. So there's something that drives us towards what we are good with and what we are not good with. Now, it just so happens that this feeling of enjoying and suffering, these are inner feelings, right? But this these can also be our multiple selves. I remember that book that I told you guys by Kate Gustin. That's a very beautiful, simple read, which is completely non-religious way of. She's a clinical psychologist that wrote the book on no self. I think that's a great book. But it kind of captures the essence of all of these religious teachings, if you will. But there's no element of religion in that book, so it's a nice book. But you know, ourself when we are enjoying, ourself when we are suffering, it's really driven by that object out there. Like some person makes you happy, some person makes you sad, some person makes you angry. So we are carrying these multiple personas, if you will, right? And those personas can take over us. And that's what this is covered in that book. And that is that hypnotized state, right? You know, the attachment, bondage can be attraction, also repulsion, both of them, right? But this inner feeling that we have that this person makes me angry obviously comes from some past experience, maybe, or the most recent experience or whatnot. But that person becomes your anchor for that self, right? So if you observe the world that you've created in your mind, that's the world that matters. And that's the world that Gita or Bible or anything, I think, is talking about. It's the psychological world. There is physical world out there, that impacts us and all that stuff. That's there. But how does it impact our mind? That's what these people are trying to get to. But what we do is we take these inner psychological feelings and we say that my happiness requires that out there. And Jiddu Krishnamurti also covers this one, right? So that object becomes important. So now we are going into this whole asura quality then, right? Of living. So are the horses driving the chariot? So now the it is driving you, your happiness. So now the chariot is completely driven by the horses. So it goes haywire. Are you unconsciously being controlled by the field, or are you conscious? Are you the conscious, aware knower of the field in control of the ego? Going back here, a little more reading here. So then he starts talking about all the things that make us unbalanced or ashuric nature. Daivic quality leads to liberation. We talked about that. So there are two types of creations, Daivic and Asuric. This is when creations of beings, again, think of this as a psychological creation, okay? There's creation of world, literal, many times we tend to, the words they use, we want to take that very literally. It's not the physical world that they're talking about. They're talking about our inner psyche. Ashuric men have no true knowledge of the way of the action, means the karma yoga, or the way of the abstention. Truth is not in them, nor clean doing, nor faithful observance, right? So they don't want to follow any of that. What drives them is really just the greed. The world is without God, is what they say, okay? Now here, it does not mean that somebody who doesn't believe in Bible or doesn't believe in Gita or Krishna for that matter, right? That's not what this means. What this means is understanding that not everything is in your control. There's a lot of unknown things that make something happen. Shuric people tend to feel like they are in control of everything. And if something goes out of control, they obviously get frustrated. And they also say that not true, right? Not founded in truth, brought about by a mutual union. So there's always like something, oh, I need this, so I need to get the money and I can buy the car. That's it, done. And that's all that means to live on this planet. If you have money, you buy it and you get it, done. That's your bliss. So there's nothing more to life, is what they are trying to say. So mutual union with desire for its sole cause, right? That's it. That's what life is about. And everything is perchance, it's just so happens. There's no ultimate, like a larger scope of things. They don't want to think long term. Everything is short term, right? Leaning on that way of seeing of life, and it's by its falsehood ruining their souls and their reason. The Asuric men, again, we are not looking at somebody out there, okay? This is for our self-exploration. Become the center or instrument of a fierce, titanic, violent action, a power of destruction in the world. So unknowingly, when we do this short-term actions, we are destroying a lot of things, and they become the fount or the fountain of injury and evil, right? Evil just does not mean something that is obvious. Like, obviously, Hitler is evil. But there's a lot of things that we do, and that is for each of us to see within ourselves to understand what are our repercussions of any actions. Like, when we are talking, gossiping about somebody, or we are giving instructions to our kids to do certain things, not do other things, or when we, I don't know, drive a car or do whatever, like damage water, or just all kinds of things, right? That is something left to us to understand our actions. And in violence is something that we just think physical harm, right? But yes, sure, Mahatma Gandhi was known for, okay, I'm not going to pick up the arms to fight the Britishers. Everything is going to be a non-violent action. There's a deeper quality to it, right? That is good. He got freedom for India, and he was quite a philosopher himself. He loved Gita, but violence can be just more than just physical violence, right? It can be just a very unintentional thing that you might do unknowingly while talking about fluff topics in a social gathering. Unknowingly, you might say something to somebody that might have a whole chain of events after that. That is also nonviolence, right? Sorry, that is also violence. Um, Resorting to insatiable desire, arrogant, full of self-esteem and the drunkenness of their pride, these misguided souls delude themselves, right? They tend to stay in that delusion, persist in false and obstinate aims, and pursue the fixed, impure resolution of their longings. They imagine that desire and enjoyment are all the aim of life, and in their inordinate and insatiable pursuit of it, they are the prey of a devouring, a measurelessly unceasing care and thought and endeavor and anxiety till the moment of their death, right? This goes on, it never stops. Because desire, the quality of desire is that if you suppress it, it only grows. And if you fulfill the desire, there is the next level of that desire. So both these things are bad. So just observing that is the solution, right? And saying, look, I'm not going to fall trap for this. And that's the key. But these are the people who are lost in this, and that goes on until they die, right? So now when the thing is lost, now when the horses have taken over, what happens, right? There is a series of things that happen, not just for that person, but the other people who are observing him as well, or her as well, right? We all get influenced by these outward displays. And now the displays can be on social media. You put a picture that, hey, I went to, I don't know, Machu Picchu, or like some fancy island, Cabo or whatnot, right? You suddenly get this perception that, oh my God, this person is way more happier than I am. And then that starts this whole like, oh my God, I can't do this, and then this, and I'm short of this, and all of that, right? So now you are also, even though you're not participating in that, this has unknowingly put you into this unbalanced category, ashuric category, right? So hoarding becomes one of the key things of when horses take over, and inferiority complex sort of takes over, right? Because now you are saying things like, I'm perfect, I'm accomplished, right? So when you're outwardly just saying that loudly, it is a deeper issue that is going on. And then, you also start saying things that are like, oh, I'm going to give to the society $10,000 or whatever, right? And then just by saying it, right, we sort of put ourselves in the self-delusion of sort of an imagined achievement, even though, you might not do that act, the fact that you have announced it and everybody has clapped for you becomes enough for you, right? So that becomes sort of like a auto suggestion that you are on the right path. But that's not right. So let's look at number 12 onwards here, a few of these. Bound by 100 bonds, again, going back to the symbology that we talked about earlier. These are the vikaras or the disorders, devoured by wrath and lust, unweariedly occupied in amassing unjust gains, which may serve their enjoyment and the satisfaction of their craving. Always they think, today I have gained this object of desire. Tomorrow I shall have that other. Today I have so much wealth. More I will get tomorrow. I have killed this and my enemy. The rest too I will kill, right? How many times in the political atmosphere we have today, we feel like, oh, there's some nation that is going to come and attack us. This is America we are talking about. And yet we are the most scared nation, if you will. I am Lord and King of men. I'm perfect, accomplished, strong, happy, fortunate, right? So their notion of happy is so different than what Krishna is trying to talk about. But they think that they are happy, right? Fortunate, a privileged enjoyer of the world. I'm wealthy. I am of high birth. Who is there like unto me, right? I will sacrifice. They say, yeah, I'm going to do a lot of charity. I will give. I will enjoy. It's all will, right? There's no the doing is not their concern at all. Thus occupied by many egoistic ideas, deluded, addicted to the gratification of desire, they fall into the unclean hell of their own evil, right? So he kind of describes here the notion of heaven and hell always exists in all of the religions, right? But a deeper understanding of Gita or Hinduism is going to reveal that the hell and heaven that they are talking about, or for that matter, I think any religion, is immediately given to you right here, right? There's physical no place out there after death where you're going to walk in and stuff like that. So it's happening right here, right now. They sacrifice and give not in the true order, but from a self regarding ostentation, foolish pride, and all that stuff. In the egoism of their strength and power, in the violence of their wrath and arrogance, they hate, despise, and belittle the God hidden in themselves. That's the key, right? And the God in man or other people, right? They cannot see this concept that he covered in chapter 15. So then, what is the solution, right? So the solution is try to understand the wisdom of ages, which Gita is trying to depict here. Sometimes the poetry is lost on many people. So he talks about, in these next few verses, he talks about like the hell that he spoke of. The doors to that hell is desire, wrath, and greed. There is a notion of rebirth that he brings about again. I cast them down into more ashoric births, he says. This I is not like a person sitting out there and relaying out your ashoric hells, or, there's no such thing, right? Because of your own action, your desires just want to do more desires and more greed and more of that, right? So you start dragging yourself down into these hells. Things catch momentum in either direction, right? So the good things will bring you up to liberation. The bad things are going to drive you down to all the continuous rebirths. Now, rebirth was a great concept that was explained nicely in that book by Kate Gustin on no self, right? And this is what I sort of have been talking about, and I had a similar understanding. Nobody knows on this planet or anywhere, right, that what happens after death. There's nobody to tell us. We're going to die and that's it, right? So, but in this given life, which is a long span, really a pretty long span, right? So here, we talked about those multiple selves that we have, right? We had a different set of selves when we were babies or child, youth, middle-aged people and older people, right? At different points of time, there has been death of certain kinds of selves that we have sort of identified with all along the way. So there has been a constant rebirth, if you will, right? Now, what kind of selves are going to appear in your life or what is going to guide you really depends on what is going to catch the momentum. Are you going upwards or downwards? Depends on that, right? Anger only breeds more anger. And every time we rationalize it away, right? So choosing is the key thing here, right? At what point do you choose? Many times we regret after the fact, right? Or we are like so disturbed and then we are trying to seek peace after the fact. But the message here is, Krishna says that to Arjuna as well, right? See, you're deciding to go become a monk in a very disturbed mind. So let's try to understand where this is coming from. Be peaceful. Once you are peaceful, then you decide. If you're trying to decide it right now, that is going to be a bad decision. Even as a monk, you're going to be disturbed over there. This staying peaceful and then deriving all the actions from there, that's the state of meditation, right? Constant 24 hours. And then Deva, that they mentioned Deva over here at various places, or the God, the inner God, is the instrument that is deep within each of us. And we just have to know how to use it. There's also this notion of karma, one way of looking at things, my sufferings are a cause of my unknown past doing. There are many stories that are narrated of Buddha, where he pardons some people who do bad to him, right? So one of the things he says in one story is that, let that account close. Somebody hits him with a rock or something. And he says that, this must be because I did something wrong to him in my past life. So let that account close, right? So that's the attitude we can bring about. And my happiness, sometimes we feel happy, must be some unknown past good or deed. And let that account close too, right? The point is that whatever is causing your suffering, whatever is causing you happiness, you don't want to attach to them, right? That's the key here. So karma itself, our actions, can be a mechanism for us to grow out of them towards liberation. That is the moksha, freedom from the cycle of karma. I don't know what I am. So there is going to be a word that is going to come up here, which is called a shastra. Not shastra, but shastra. A shastra means science. The literal Wikipedia sentence says, not all of this stuff in the bracket, but the education which protects us, and we'll talk about from what, by providing discipline, right? If you look at science, that's what it is, right? There's a certain way you approach math and you're going to get to an answer. That is Shastra, right? Guides us, sometimes holds our finger and guides us, right? So there is steps given to you to do this, do this, do this, and then you're going to get to the answer, right? And in this philosophical world, when long time ago, since humanity, right, when language did not exist, and then people didn't have way to write things down, there was still philosophy, right? They were understanding things in their own way, and these people are also carrying a certain kind of an understanding, their own experiential type of an understanding that they're carrying within themselves. And those people then can be called as guru or shastra, right? But again, the teacher is only as good as the student, right? Comes back to us, not the other person. One has to stay teachable. Guru will come to you, right? So let's read from from year 18 onwards, and then we'll wrap this up. These proud haters evil, cruel, vilest among men in the world, I cast down continually into more and more Ashuric births, cast into Ashuric wombs, deluded birth after birth, they find me not. Me is within themselves, right? Not Krishna himself. Although you can utilize Krishna, which is what chapter 7 through 13 is about, 7 through 12, not as they do not seek me, right? So they're not, if you're not seeking something, you're not going to find it. And sink down into the lowest status of soul nature. Threefold are the doors of hell, desire, wrath, and greed. Therefore, let man renounce these three, right? That's what you want to renounce, not the kingdom, not the war. Arjuna was trying to leave like, oh, I'm going to give up the kingdom. Well, that's not going to do anything. The hatred that he carries for his brother or the desire that he had for the kingdom is going to stay with him even when he becomes the monk. A man liberated from these doors of darkness, O son of Kunti, Kunti is mother of Arjuna, follows his own higher good and arrives at the highest soul status, right? He who, having cast aside the rules of the Shastra, right, the wisdom, followeth the prompting of desire. Like if you did not know this, now you're going to look at desire and attachment in a slightly different way, just because we talked about it, right? Not that I'm the guru or whatnot, right? I'm just reading it off of here. Attained not to perfection, nor happiness, nor the happiest soul status, right? If you cast this aside, so he says, don't cast aside the wisdom. Therefore, let the Shastra be thy authority in determining what ought to be done or what ought not to be done, knowing what hath been declared, right? This is their experience. That has been their experience that they have captured in those things. Thou oughtest to work in this world, right? So that can be your guide. So yeah, it was indeed a small chapter, but a lot of information.
Thank you, Sasha.